Yeah, so in this video, we'll be continuing my Seneca series, where I pretty much just break down a few of Seneca's letters, the ones I think are the most important. And if you want to, you can find all of these letters at Wikipedia. You can do this pretty easily by like Googling Seneca's letters or letters from a Stoic, and you can find them all there. And just as a side note, if you don't know what these letters are, they're pretty much just letters from Seneca, of course, to a guy in Rome named Lucilius. And what happened basically was Lucilius is asking Seneca on how to become a better person and how to become a better Stoic in general. And Seneca is just helping him out by sending him these great letters, filled with philosophy and wisdom. And now we can use them and look at them. And so this one in particular, this letter is letter 96 out of the 200, and it's called On Facing Hardships. And it pretty much covers how to think and how to react when you encounter like pain or suffering. And it's really, really good. And so the first quote here that I think is very important is, "If you ask me, I think that for a man, there is no misery unless there be something in the universe which he thinks miserable." This is by Seneca, of course. And so basically what Seneca is trying to explain here is that like nothing can be painful unless you believe that something is painful. That's why like some people are able to suffer way more than others. Like for example, if we look at people in poorer countries, like in South America or parts of Asia, there's lots of Africa as well. You know, a lot of them are able to still live good lives, despite the fact that they're poor and they don't have all these material goods and material wealth that we have. Like if you look at the statistics here, even though the United States is ranked first when it comes to wealth, making us like the richest country in the world, we have the third most reports of depression out of almost 200 countries. So this shows that even if we have material wealth, it doesn't mean that people are happier. The thing that matters more is how you perceive your own life to be. So like if we look at the statistics, even though the United States is ranked first when it comes to total wealth, making us the richest country in the world, we're ranked third out of 200 countries when it comes to the most reports of depression. That means we're like the top 1.5% of the entire world, which is really, really bad. And this shows that even though we have material wealth, even though we have all these material goods, it still doesn't mean that we're happier. So just to put it in another way, it kind of reminds me of how some people are able to eat way, way spicier foods. If you didn't know, everybody eats spicy foods the same. Like, we all taste the same spiciness. But then how are some people able to eat like more spicy stuff? And that's probably because they perceive it in a different way than we do, than normal people do. So even though we're eating the same thing, one person can say it tastes really good, and another person can say it's super painful, and they can barely stand it, which is really interesting. And it kind of relates to the idea that it doesn't matter how much pain it is, it doesn't matter how your environment actually is, but more of how you think about it. So even if you live in a really good environment, you can still live a terrible life because you think you're living a terrible life. And even if you're living in a bad environment, if you're poor or hungry all the time, you can still live a good life because you think it's a good life. Alright, so I'm just going to move on to the next quote that I thought was really, really powerful. So later in the letter he says, "Nothing will ever happen to me that I shall receive with ill humor or with a wry face. I shall pay up all my taxes willingly. Now all the things that which cause us to groan or recoil are part of the tax of life. Things, my dear Lucilius, which you should never hope and never seek to escape." So right here he's talking about the idea of the tax of life, which is really interesting, and I'll go into it right now. What he's saying with this is that life is actually good. Life is pleasurable, even if you think it's bad. Even if you think that your life is generally depressing or bad, you can definitely tell me that there are pleasurable parts of it. um, like even tasting food, good food, like that's really good part of it. Being able to talk with people, talk with friends, that's a great part of it. And what he's saying with the tax of life is that pain and suffering is just like the tax of it, because life is good, and so with good comes pain, and the pain that you get from life is just part of it, and you have to deal with it. And so it reminds me of how much we take for granted, including me, definitely. I'm very lucky to live in the United States. I live in a wealthy area, and things are very, very good. I don't have to worry about any of the basic necessities of life. I don't have to worry about like food or water. I don't have to worry about clothing, a roof over my head. That's all taken care of by my parents, so it's very easy. But people in more poorer areas, they have to do all of this. All of these things are huge worries for them that they have to think about every single day. And so it basically is telling you to be more grateful and realize the things that you do have and the things that give you pleasure. But let's move on real quick, and we'll go on to... So later he says, "You feared for your life, but just as a long journey includes dust, mud, and rain. Come, did you not know when you prayed for a long life that this was what you are praying for? A long life includes all of these troubles." So again, I think he's touching on the idea of the tax of life, that you have to suffer a little bit to have pleasure. And, we all have had our moments of happiness. We all have had, joy. You can't deny it. You just look through everything and there's something there. And if you can't find anything, it might be because you're just ungrateful for the things that you have. Again, if we go back to, the comparison with people that don't have anything at all. People who are homeless, people who are living in poor countries, they have to worry about food. They have to worry about clothing and shelter. A lot of us don't have to worry about any of these things, and we have to be more grateful and see that, we're all supported by all this. And so if we all have these things, then maybe we have to just accept the tax of life. Maybe we just have to, accept the pain and just see that it's just part of it. It's part of how life is. And if there's nothing you can do about it, then maybe you just deal with the pain and move on despite it. Yeah, like especially now in the 21st century when we are more developed than we have ever been. Additionally, if you live in a wealthier country like the United States or places in Europe, your life is even better when it comes to the basic necessities. Like, let's go back 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. People didn't have a lot of the things that we have now. Even the most wealthy of people back then had no air conditioning, no heating. They had no phones. They had no electricity even. So, especially with electricity, that was a huge one. Whenever they wanted light, they had to have torches or fire. So even if you have like a big castle, it was really smoky and dusty, and it was very badly lit. And even their food wasn't as good as we have now. It's not as cheap. It's not as well made either. And so I just want to continue to one last quote that I thought was really, really good in the letter. So Seneca writes, "Ask yourself voluntarily which you would choose if some god gave you the choice. Life in a cafe or life in a camp." And so with this idea right here, he's saying, would you rather choose a life of comfort or a life of fulfillment? Would you rather live in a cafe, which is warm and friendly and nice? You're protected from the cold and any pain. Or would you live in a camp, which is painful, and you have to sleep on the ground. It's cold outside. You have to hunt for food and everything. And so one is uncomfortable and one is comfortable, but one life is better than the other. One is better short term and one is better long term. So with the cafe, life is way better short term. Everything's really nice, but there's a problem of boredom. Have you ever had that where you're living a really comfortable life, but eventually you get bored and you have no idea what to do? So even if you're living a nice life comfortably, if you're not doing anything meaningful or useful, then you're not really going anywhere and you're not really, adding to your life. So you're really unfulfilled and not really goal driven. But if you're living in a camp, but if you're living in a camp, with his metaphor here, then life can be a lot more fulfilling, even if it's more painful, even though it takes more hard work, it's a lot more interesting, if you would you rather live in a camp for the rest of your life or in a cafe? You'd get bored in the cafe, but in a camp you'd have a lot of things to do. You can hike, you can hunt, you can look for stuff. It's just a lot more interesting than in a cafe. So even though it's more painful, it's a lot more fulfilling and a lot more interesting to be in. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you want to see the letter itself, I can put a link in the description. I think I will. And if you want all the letters, I'll do the same thing. I'll put the link in the description. And with that, I think I'll end the video here. So see you later and take care.